You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky. Diane, owner of Type A Catering Events, is joining me for today's podcast. I like to have her early on in the season to wrap up weddings from the past year and talk about the upcoming season as far as food, bar, and pricing. Some of the things that Diane may say today aren't going to be things that you want to hear, but I want you to come into this with an open mind and know that everything that we talk about today is going to benefit you in the long run. It's going to benefit your budget, your planning, and your sanity. Diane, it's so good to have you back for season 3.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me. This is always a lot of fun.
What year of wedding catering is this going to be for you?
Ooh, it kind of depends on how you count. I have a kind of untraditional route into catering. I studied engineering and Spanish in college because my parents said they wouldn't send me to culinary school. And then I ended up cooking. And so I started cooking for my church. And I can remember having a conversation with my mom. Hey, do you want to do some catering? And I said, yes, but I don't think I want to do weddings. And that changed. But about 3 hours after I said that to her, we had friends from church who had a daughter who was younger and was suddenly planning a quick wedding. And so I did my first wedding. So that was in 2003. And then I kept cooking. I met my husband. I had a couple of babies. I toyed with getting another degree and becoming like an accountant or something. And I tell people, I said that was to keep my sanity when I was a stay-at-home mom. And it also taking some accounting classes, which I hadn't taken, was very beneficial when I ended up owning a small business. But ultimately, Bay, kind of as it exists now, came to life in 2012. So this is our 13th season. We are not a mass market caterer. We fill a niche market. We do a lot of hand-holding for our clients. I have planners that send me clients that they know are going to need just a lot of help because they have very specific needs. We had a client a couple of years ago that dad had a relationship with this boutique winery in Virginia, and that's what they wanted to serve at the wedding. So there were lots of hoops to jump through in order to legally serve wine from Virginia and Kentucky because it wasn't Mayomi or something that we can walk into any liquor barn or Total Wine and buy. So that's kind of the niche we fill, not for all our clients, but an awful lot of them. Because I like what I do, I like all the pieces. I like talking about rentals. I like talking about visions for the day. I don't want to just show up on the day of the wedding having no idea what I'm walking into. I'd rather spend a little bit more time with the client and know, hey, do you know what your tent's going to look like? Because some of our clients have full service planners that are going to do all of that. Some of them have day of, some of them have month of, and what they offer varies. I'd rather spend a little bit more time with our client, be a little bit more all-inclusive for them, but know that the day of, we're in a better place.
Absolutely. Let's take a look back at 2024 just a little bit. We talk about the pandemic a lot in our industry because it changed so much. We are definitely moving in the right direction finally, but every year is still changing. Whereas things never really used to change a lot for us as far as some things. But one of the things that we've seen change a lot since 2020 are guest counts. Where did you kind of see your average guest count at last year? Did you see it increase from 2023?
Maybe slightly. Because of the services we offer, we work at some venues that tend to appeal to more destination clients. And because of that, by design, those do tend to be smaller weddings. Not always. Sometimes we'll have a destination wedding with 200 plus people. But frequently, I would say destination tends to be somewhere between 100 and 150, and 125 tends to be that sweet spot, just because People are traveling. It's significantly more expense for the guests.
What number wise? You said 125 to 150?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that probably about what you saw in 2023?
Probably.
Okay,
I
I
bet
thought so.
we did. If I pulled weddings, we did a lot of weddings with 125 to 150 guests.
Yeah.
We work a lot at Castle and Key, and in theory, their max count is 175. At least that's what they have tables and chairs for. You can get a few more people in their space, but that tends to be what fits nicely. And we did several weddings that were at that number. But I would say 125, 150 ends up being a really good place. It fits a lot of places. That's one of the issues you have when people start having these huge guest counts. The venue choices available to them decrease and they get more expensive.
People are always shocked when I tell them once they hit about the 150, 175 guest count here in Lexington, we start knocking out 60 to 70% of our venues just because if they can hold that, it's not going to be comfortable and you're not going to be able to have a backup plan rain wise, that kind of thing. So definitely the 150 is great for our venues here.
I would completely agree. And one of the things people don't understand, and I'll walk through with people, is this concept that at venues you kind of need 3 spaces. If everything is going to be at the venue, ceremony, cocktail hour, reception, you have to have 3 spaces or 2, and you need to be able to get all the guests out of the space that's being flipped, because that's how you end up with 2 spaces. 2 spaces means that ceremonies in one location, we move people for cocktail hour, then they go back to the ceremony space, but that has been turned into the reception space. Now, there are pros and cons to that. It's going to be more expensive because it's going to take more staff. It's going to take more planner staff, more catering staff, venue staff, because usually, like tables and chairs, I mean, I have planners that are dropping linens on tables at 10 in the morning. If we can't drop linens until 6 p.m. because you're getting married at 5:30, you simply need more bodies to do that. It can happen, but one of the venues that traditionally requires a flip, their cocktail hour space is outside. So if Mother Nature is not kind, suddenly we have a problem. And these are the conversations that usually planners get to have. I have been known to have these conversations just because people don't want to have these conversations. People have spent so much money on a venue. And for someone like me to look at them and go, okay, that's great. But you realize that if Mother Nature is not kind, we have a problem. They don't want to hear. But that requires a tent. Kentucky didn't make the national news for flooding in September when the hurricane came through to North Carolina. But everyone who did a wedding on September 28th last year can talk to you about the weather. We had venues that didn't have power because power got knocked out. We were at Castle and Key, which is beautiful, but their ceremony is in a sunken garden, which is the lowest point on the grounds, and it's grass. And it was pouring down rain. And so everyone's pivoting, and everyone will pivot and have conversations, but you just have to these are the conversations that's useful to have before 3 days before the ceremony, because brides and their mothers are better prepared 6 months out to talk about this than 3 days out when we go, okay, so you know that rain plan you didn't want to talk about 6 months ago? Now we need to figure out what it is and try to execute it. And if we have to rent stuff or do stuff, we need to hope and pray that we can get stuff, because prime wedding season, Lexington's busy. And so heaters, tents, sidewalls, it's like sometimes people go, but I need this. And it's like, yeah, I'm so sorry. And this is the poor planning on, and your part is not a crisis on mine. And I feel bad for them. And that's why we try to have these conversations early on.
And there'll be weekends in September, October that the rental companies will stop taking deliveries in probably April or May. because they all have the setup. They only have so many delivery crews to be able to set stuff up, deliver. It's important to go ahead and get those rain plans, kind of figure it out in advance so that you do have a backup plan.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been sitting at either of the big rental companies in town and listening to them, like in May when people call and they need chairs and stuff for graduation or stuff, and they just don't think about it. But because it's also wedding season and they'll go, yes, we have chairs, but you need to come pick them up. And people are like, oh, I don't want to pick them up, or they simply don't have the facilities. I have a client in May where we didn't get quite everything reserved as timely as they wanted, and their first choice of flatware and glassware from the one rental company was not available. So we're getting it from the other rental company. And I said, are you having it delivered or picked up? And she's like, we're picking it up, and they're picking up glass racks. And I told her, I said, that's totally fine. I personally do not like transporting glass because if you break it, you're going to buy it. But I mentioned to her, okay, glass racks are about 2 feet by 2 feet. And depending on what kind of glass, they're 6, 8 inches to up to 12 inches tall. And they hold 18 to 20 to 25 glasses. So when you start talking, okay, we need wine glasses, champagne flutes, and water glasses for 125 people, you're suddenly talking about a reasonable amount of space that it's going to require. It would require like someone's SUV with the middle and the back row laid down to get all those glasses in there. And so it's not just simply, oh, I'm going to go pick up a few glasses. You're picking up more than a few glasses.
Yeah. And then as far as the average amount your couple spent last year, like per plate, do you know what that is off the top of your head by any chance?
I'm expensive. So it depends on if it has a bar in it or not, because I would say without a bar, our clients were probably at about 85 a person. With a bar, they were probably 125, 130.
That is with labor.
That's labor and rentals.
Okay. And
At
so
least some of them.
Okay. What would you say the average is just like per plate without like labor and stuff?
Buffets probably double entree buffets start at about 32. If you put like tenderloin carving on that, you're probably 45, 48, depending on what else is on it. That range. So I tell people if you assume $40 for dinner, 10 to 15 for cocktail hour, 20 to 25 at the bar. So where are we? So we're at 50, we're at 75. Plus staff, plus rentals. And rentals are a big question mark because there are venues we work at that have full kitchens that include equipment, and I need very, very little. And then there are venues that my coming in to cook requires a cook's tent with equipment. And a cook's tent, an oven, a couple of warmers, and tables, I've spent $1,500 without blinking.
Yep. You talked about you being expensive. When you talk about those initial prices, they're not really that much more expensive than everyone else. You do have a food and beverage minimum. I think you may be the only one that has that, or at least that I work with. There may be more.
Okay.
But people are like, oh, that's a lot. It adds up so quickly. And
it
they'll maybe
does.
go with another catering company because they're like, oh, they're only $35 per plate, whereas, Diane's 75. Well, by the time you add the cocktail hour, you add the bar, you add the service, you add the tax, you're literally at the same price, regardless of who you go with. And I don't think that couples really realize that in the beginning because they hear that 35 or whatever, and that's who they're going to go with and not really realize all of the plus on it.
Yeah. I mean, and I say I'm expensive. I don't think I am outrageously expensive, but for the person, I think the challenge is that most couples have never paid for catering. And so they have no idea what it costs. And Okay, so what does it cost for you to go to dinner at a nice restaurant comparable what you want to feed your guests? And then add gratuity, but in our case, you're adding gratuity and you're also adding all the other pieces. It is more expensive to hire me at your venue than it is to go to your restaurant because I have to bring so much stuff in for a one-off meal. Whereas the restaurant is depreciating all of the things across 30 days in a month and all of that. Um, I am I am very determined to make sure that my couples go into hiring me with their eyes open. I try to be extremely transparent in pricing because I'm not interested in having somebody totally flip out when they get their final bill. Now, it does happen. I had a father of the bride last October who, when he got his bill, it was like, whoa, this number's higher. And it's like, well, talk to your daughter because she added stuff. When I quote rentals, because for most of our clients, I will quote rentals. I can go into the rental company and I know what the cheapest is, but that's not what I would pick for my wedding. And so if I quote the cheapest in everything, yes, it gives you a smaller number. But then when we go to the rental company and you go, ooh, I like this better, and I like this better, and I like this better, suddenly we've doubled the rental cost. So I try really hard to talk to my brides and ask things like, okay, do you like satin? Do you like texture? Do you like a colored glass? Do you like gold flatware? All of those things so that when I put a rental quote together, it's hopefully a more in line with the taste and the vibe the bride is looking for. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes our color scheme changes because people hire me in the beginning and they have an idea of what their wedding's going to be. And then as they plan, some of that changes. But at least if I've picked a velvet napkin, I've budgeted a velvet napkin as opposed to the client who goes, well, you budgeted a poly napkin, which is like 70, 80 cents. And I'm holding a napkin in my hand that's $2.50. And I tell people, I said, it's your money. So I try to be mindful when I'm spending other people's money, but I will tell you where I would spend the money and where I wouldn't. And I think that helps.
And even just talking about bringing the food to a venue versus a restaurant, I had lunch at J. Alexander's last week. I had a sandwich, a drink, and by the time I left tip, it was $36. And that was just for lunch. I didn't expect it to be that much, and so
Right.
it just adds up so quickly. And talking about that, how have food prices increased for 2025? Where are you kind of at now for buffet versus plated kind of starting prices?
I'm grateful we don't cook a lot of eggs. Because right now eggs are twice what they were 3 months ago. I think we're still seeing probably a 10% increase in food costs. I'm quoting 2026 brides, especially because I'm quoting September of 2026.
Mm-hmm.
I am taking what I would price it for a wedding in 2025 and I'm adding 10%.
Okay.
And I may end up repricing stuff a little. Right now our bar price is staying the same, but food is there and that gives me some wiggle. Because that is the hard and the unknown. I mean, and I can remember we used to sell 5 appetizers for $14.50 a person. That was a long time ago. That was when I was starting. And now, I mean, you're looking at 5 appetizers for 25. And there are some pluses depending on what you pick. You pick crab cakes, so you pick shrimp cocktail, you pick beef tenderloin sandwiches, there's an upcharge. And there has to be because the food has gone up. But the other thing that's gone up is labor. I mean, in theory, minimum wage has not gone up, but there's nobody that's working for me that's making less than $15 an hour plus tips. And that's something that I don't know where other people are, but when 2020 happened, we added a gratuity. Our staff works hard. And yes, people pay them hourly, but I put a gratuity on the bill because my staff deserves it. So when we do a quote, it has the gratuity is not added until the final bill, but it's on there. And if people read their contracts and their proposals, they will see that. They don't always, but it's there. And it's distributed between everyone. Bartenders, kitchen, dishwasher, everybody that works your wedding gets a piece of the tip.
Let's talk a little bit about bar pricing as well. You actually have one of the most affordable bar packages and pricing in the Lexington area. So even though you say your food might be a little bougie pricing, I think some of your bar pricing actually kind of makes up for that. Where does your 4 hours open bar beer and wine start for 2025?
Okay, in 2025, 4-hour bars are $22 a person, and that's for beer, wine, and liquor. That's like Makers and Buffalo Trace and Tito's. It's 22. Now, most of our clients end up at 25 at 4.5-hour bars because the way it works is you end up with if the ceremony's at 5:30, so we say ceremonies from 5:30 to 6, cocktail hours from 6 to 7, receptions from 7 to 11. I will not serve until the moment that the reception ends. We like to shut down 30 minutes beforehand is our policy. So we sell a 4.5-hour bar. So essentially bar opens at 6 following the ceremony. It closes at 10:30. Reception ends at 11. So we do not call last call. We do not pour shots. We do not pour doubles. There are some caveats in our bar pricing. I tell people we do something called the soft close. When we hit our 4 or 4.5 hours, we basically stop serving liquor. And as they're stopping bottles and people walk up and go, "Can I have it?" You can have a beer. Can I have something else? No. And if you're nasty, I won't let you have anything. And usually my bar staff needs me to stand in front and smile and go, "We're closed." But you didn't call last call. It's like, "No, I didn't. No, I didn't. You've had plenty. Thank you so much. Go dance. Bye." And we do that for a couple of reasons. When you close the bar and you call last call, everyone thinks they need a drink or 2 or 3. And so from the DJ's perspective, everybody's out dancing and having a great time, and you call last call and the dance floor empties because everyone thinks they need to get that last drink. And quite frankly, they don't. It's like a 4.5-hour bar is priced the way it is because people are tapering off. Some people are not, but they probably need to. And our job is to get people home safely at the end of the night too. You've had ample opportunity to have plenty to drink. The other thing that we sell a lot of is we do dinner wine service. Instead of extending the bar, what we will do is we'll do cocktail hour from 6 to 7. And then from 7 to 7:30, while our guests are moving from wherever cocktail hour is to dinner, there is a bottle of white wine, there's a bottle of red wine on the table. It makes the place setting look nice because everybody's got a wine glass. But one of the things that happens is we need guests to leave cocktail hour and go find their seat. And if they think they need to get another drink, they go to the bar. But if the bar is closed, they go sit down because I need them to sit down so we can introduce the couple. If they're doing their dance, if dad's doing a welcome, people are seated so we can get the next part of the reception going. Because for many of our clients, what they're looking forward to is the dance and the fun part. But to get to the dance and the fun part, I need to get through all these other things. So if I shut the bar from 7 to 7:30 and I put wine on the table instead, it slows people down. The people that don't want wine, they'll suffer through a half an hour of the bar not being open. Drink some water or tea or lemonade. But it helps, and cost-wise, it's negligibly more expensive. Like, I think I'm charging $25 for a 4.5-hour bar. I think it's $26 to do dinner wine service if you pick our house wine. Here's my attitude about alcohol. Alcohol is one of those places where people, quite frankly, get raped. Rather, you get your bar from me and be happy than charge significantly more money for the bars that we serve. And the reason is that my bartenders are professional bartenders. They are there to work at your party. When people provide their own alcohol and they have a friend or a buddy that's going to bartend, it can go south. Because the truth of the matter is that if one of your guests needs to stop drinking, my staff is going to cut them off. It might involve me, might involve the wedding planner, but they're going to stop serving them. Whereas your friend, they're not going to want to cut people off. And there are timelines at weddings for a reason. And part of that is your contract with your venue says you're going to stop at X amount of time, and then your vendors are going to be out at X amount of time. For that to happen, things have to close. And when it's my bar and my alcohol, I tell my bartenders, bar's closed, bar shuts down. When it's not my alcohol, when it's the client's alcohol, even if I've talked till I'm blue in the face what time we're shutting the bar down, people have had alcohol and they're having a good time. Oh, can we keep going? And when it's their alcohol, it's harder to say no because then they'll go get it back out. And it can get ugly. And even when it's not supposed to get ugly, it can get ugly. So I try to keep our bar prices. Yes, I make some money doing it, but the truth of the matter is by the time you would pay a bartending service, pay for them to do mixers and everything else, go to Liquor Barn, Total Wine, wherever, and buy the alcohol, you're probably not saving a whole lot of money over just having me do the bar. And I bring it all. I know what we need. I have mixers. I have bitters. I'm going to bring soda. I'm going to bring cranberry juice and sweet and sour. I'm going to have the bar fruit and the picks for the bar fruit and the shakers and the stoppers, and make sure we have ice. All of the parts of the bar that people don't really think about. And it's much more complicated to do a bar for 100 or 200 people than it is to do a bar for 20 of your friends in your backyard.
What do you see are the most popular beers right now that people are drinking at weddings?
So this is so funny. And I'm not a beer drinker. In the summertime, we pour a heck of a lot of Mick Ultra. The people that drink beer, they want light beer. They want something that they can drink several of and be okay. Our standard bar package, you get 3 domestic beers. And you can get Miller, Mick Ultra, Bud Light, Coors Light, Yingling, Garage Beer are kind of I think that's 6 maybe. Standard beers, there's no upcharge. We do charge a little upcharge if you want something local just because it costs us more. Typically the way I bill stuff for that is it's the difference between what we would include and what you want costs. For instance, if X costs, I'm going to make up numbers. Say a case costs $24 and what you want costs $40, you're going to pay the difference. So, yeah, and that's standard. I mean, some people want seltzers and all that, but quite frankly, they're more expensive. And if you're buying a bar that's got vodka on it, let's be honest, a seltzer is really vodka and soda with some kind of splash of flavor. So we've got cranberry juice and orange juice and sweet and sour and oranges and lemons and limes. It's pretty easy to create this. If you want High Noons or you want Trulies or you want any of those, we can get them. I mean, we do a fair amount of customization to our bars. But I mean, you also just have vodka sodas.
You talked about how appetizers used to be able to do like 5 for $15 ish, and how now it's like 5 for $25. A lot of times, like, we always had this mentality that just doing appetizers as dinner was cheaper. Where are we at on that now? Is it cheaper to do appetizers, a buffet, plated? Where do they come out, like, cost difference wise?
I tell people there are kind of 3 components when I'm quoting. There's the menu piece, there's the staff piece, and then there's equipment, depending on what it takes to do. And buffet is going to be cheapest. It may be about even to do appetizers, but because here's the thing I would tell you, 5 appetizers is not dinner. If we're doing dinner, we're probably doing 6, 7, 8 appetizers because we're going to do a couple of kinds of sandwiches and maybe 3 hot appetizers and 2 cold appetizers, or we're adding a cheese board or things like that. If somebody comes to me and they're trying to be very conservative in their budget, they're going to have chicken, pork, 2 vegetables, a salad, and bread. And they're going to land between 30 and 32, depending on what we do.
I know that we have talked about this on podcasts before. I have a whole podcast on this. Every caterer is different. Let's talk about tastings. What we see on TV on wedding shows is not real life. At least it's not real life in Lexington. You do not get to go from caterer to caterer trying all of the free food. If you want to try food from caterers, I always recommend the Bridal Bliss Classic wedding show in January and August. You will have probably 7 to 8 caterers there that you can try food. A lot of caterers either charge for a tasting or you get to do a tasting after you have paid your deposit with the caterer.
I would say we're in the pay the deposit. How our process works, partially because I have a smaller staff, because we do less weddings. I'm at 95+% of my weddings. At this point, if I'm not going to be able to be at your wedding, I don't book a wedding. That's just how it is. For instance, I have...
It's like you're Type A or something.
It is. I'm Type A. It is a little bit. But I have a 17-year-old who's going to be a senior next year. And we're not taking a wedding Memorial Day weekend in 2026 because he's graduating. And so I want to be able to enjoy that. So I'm not taking a wedding. And yes, probably I could staff and everything, fill it. But it's that's not what we do. People hire me. I answer all the emails. I do all the proposals. I'm at all the tastings. I don't want to do a bait and switch, which is that, hey, you've talked to Diane the whole time, but she's not going to be there on your wedding day. Because of that, I can't afford to do tastings for people that haven't had a proposal with real numbers in front of them. So, I get emails that say, hey, we'd like to schedule a tasting. And it's like, that's not how we start. How we start is you send me an inquiry and I go, yes, we're available on your date. Or I go, oh, I'm so sorry, we are not available on your date. Good luck with your planning. So we're available on your date. The next thing we do is I schedule a call. And they take 30, 45 minutes, and I ask all the questions, and then I send a line item proposal, which is, hey, this is what we've talked about for cocktail hour, or here are options for cocktail hour. Here's pasta, here's cheese and charcuterie. So these are your options for that. Okay, here's a buffet, and here are maybe 4 entrees we talked through. It's like, okay, here's the pricing if we do this and this, or here's the pricing if we do this or this. This is staff, this is rentals, this is bar, all of those things. And then I send it off. And if we fit your budget, you think we're going to be a good fit just personality wise, then if you want to hire us, we get what we call a date deposit, which is $500. It is non-refundable. Essentially, it means that I'm holding the date for you because once I give you that date, you're my only wedding. And then we schedule a tasting. And you come in and we prepare... if you're doing past appetizers during cocktail hour, we'll prepare 4. And so you can go, hey, I'm actually going to do 3, but I want to try these 4 so I can see and we can talk about, okay, this is a good mix. Maybe there's one that's seafood because you don't want them all to be seafood because not everybody eats seafood. And, this is a good vegetarian choice. And this is very Kentucky. And so we'll taste 4 appetizers. And then if it's a buffet, we're going to prepare the 2 entrees and a couple of sides for you to go, okay, yeah, I like all of this. Oh, I like this, but I would like people to be honest because I eat onions. I have friends that don't. One of my good friends' husbands, the story I tell, and I'm going to date myself, is there used to be something called Atomic Cafe downtown, which was like Caribbean food, and he'd order black beans and rice, and he would, if you forgot to tell them not to put the scallions on it, he would sit with the fork and he would pick off every scallion on top of his red beans and rice before he ate it. And so tell me, if you go, oh, this is garlic forward, we can go, okay, we can do less garlic, or you like this, but. So that's what I tell people. I said, the reason for you to come to a tasting is to tell me what you like, what you don't like, and we'll go from there. Very, very, very rarely does someone come for their tasting and not sign a contract. Sometimes we'll have planners that they'll have clients spend deposits with multiple people so they can taste multiple people, and that's fine. But essentially, if you pay the date deposit and you don't book us, it pays us for the time we've spent talking to you, preparing your tasting, the money we've spent on the food. Otherwise, the tasting is applied. Now, the only caveat to that is every once in a while we'll have very small weddings that are like a Friday weddings. We work a lot at Castle and Key, and they do elopement packages. And sometimes we'll do a small Friday wedding. We don't make them hit our same food and beverage minimum, but because of that, we'll charge them like $250 for the tasting.
As far as your food and beverage minimum in October, what is that?
$6,500.
Okay, so that means that they have to hit $6,500 with food and beverage before service and tax and rentals.
Essentially,
Correct.
yes. And that's essentially if you say buffet start at about 32 and you spend 10 at cocktail hour, you're at 42, and you spend 22 on an open bar, you're at $64. So if you have 100 people, there you are.
Yeah. So 6,500 divided by 150 is $43. Yeah. I mean, that was literally my lunch last week. So
yeah.
Although it sounds like a lot and a big number, when you divide it, when you math, it's really not that big. Then your gratuity is what percentage?
It depends. So if we are doing the bar, it is 10% of food and beverage. If we are not doing the bar, it is 15%.
Okay. As far as booking a caterer, is there a better time to book a caterer than like X amount of months out? What are your thoughts on that as far as when to pick a caterer?
This is probably the thing that has changed the most post-COVID. I would say I used to book more. So typically we do an August wedding show and a January wedding show. And typically in the past, by January, most of my season for that year was booked. I was filling a handful of dates, and I booked most in August. Now I would say half and half. I am still booking this year. Like I have a proposal to put together for an August wedding. I have someone I need to talk to about a July wedding. It's February, kind of the end of February. And then I'm also talking to people for May and September of 2026. So, I mean, 14 plus months out. I think it varies with us because of the style of business we run as far as the number of dates that we have available. It really varies. Some years a date books and some years a date doesn't book.
One of the things that I do want to talk about before we move on is the things to ask a caterer before hiring them. I am going to, in a bit, circle to the maybe less expensive caterers and things to really look out for, and share a TikTok that I just literally saw yesterday. Honestly, things to ask the caterer before you hire them. What you don't realize, Diane and I know that you don't realize this, but because you haven't been a bride before, you haven't walked into these situations before, especially bussing the table, where that is something that you do. You don't think twice about it. You take the trash out. You make sure those things are taken care of. Many of the caterers that are going to be like maybe your taco bar kind of caterers, your restaurant kind of caterers, that don't do this maybe full time or as often, they're not as full service. Right. So what are some of the questions that a couple should ask their caterer that they do on the wedding day?
You could start with is, where's the food going to be cooked? I mean, one of the things that you have to be mindful of, boneless, skinless chicken breasts have a bad rap in catering because all of us have been in some kind of buffet situation or plated situation where we've gotten a piece of chicken that is dry as sawdust. And the reason is it's not particularly forgiving. Chicken's great if it's prepared correctly, if it's timed right, but if somebody cooks chicken in their kitchen and then that chicken has to go in a hot box and then it has to be transported to a venue, and then depending on the timeline of the wedding, it sits in a box, it doesn't improve. So part of when I talk about equipment and rentals is like, if I'm serving chicken at your wedding, unless it's a boneless, skinless thigh, which I'm braising, which is very forgiving, I'm finishing your chicken on site. It's going in an oven at your venue. And so, but that takes money. That takes either the venue's got to have ovens or I'm going to rent ovens. And so I would say that's a question. And I can sell somebody, they can have what's an airline chicken breast, which is a nicer piece of chicken, and beef tenderloin and asparagus, all prepared and finished on site at the venue. On the flip side, for a client who doesn't have the budget to do that, we could do a braised chicken thigh, we could do smoked brisket, or we could do sliced pork tenderloin, and we could do Southern style green beans, or dill glazed carrots. There are things that we can sell you that are going to be just as good if it's prepared in my kitchen, but you have to go into it planning a menu for that situation. That would be my first one, is where's the food going to be prepared? How many staff is going to be on site, and who is going to be my day of contact? Because some of the larger catering companies have people that do sales, and then they have basically event coordinators. And so I kind of liken it to playing telephone. So you have one conversation with one person, but that person's not going to be at your venue at your event day of. So you have to make sure everything that you've discussed with point A gets to point B so that then the staff can execute it. So that would be also a question, is who is going to be my day of person? And if it is not the person doing your sales, do you have an opportunity to have at least a phone call with that person to make sure everybody's on the same page? So rentals are due to the rental companies about 2 weeks out. Our final guest count is not due until 5 to 8 days. Typically, I tell people if it's a Saturday wedding, their guest count's due the Friday before. But really, I don't do that invoice to the following Monday because people always lose people over the weekend, and I don't want to remath. Not that I don't like mathing, but it's like, okay, I got the invoice all done, I send it, and sure enough, people send me back and go, well, we lost 2 people over the weekend. And I haven't bought the food yet, so it really doesn't matter if you've lost 2 people to me. So typically what happens is I email you, you send me a number, and then on Monday, I send an email in the morning that says, hey, I'm going to put your invoice together. Any changes? And they tell me yes or no. But before the guest count is due, usually 3 to 4 weeks out, I'm going to reach out and go, hey, how you doing? Can we schedule a call? And part of that is because the amount of time between when I start talking to people and when the wedding is can be so far apart. Sometimes I keep the proposal from the tasting in everyone's file, and I take notes on it. And so it'll say flowers, TBD, cake, TBD. And so now I'm coming back to go, okay, what are we doing? Who did you hire to do your cake? Well, why do I care? Because I'm going to cut your cake. I'm not going to charge you to cut your cake because, quite frankly, I don't want Aunt Susie cutting your cake to save however much money it is because Aunt Susie doesn't know how to cut a wedding cake. So we're going to cut your cake. So I need to know, okay, did you get a beautiful 3-tier cake, but you're keeping the top, okay? And then is it 1 flavor? Is it 2 flavors? Are there kitchen cakes in the back? Are we putting this on disposable and putting it at a station, or do you want it served to all your guests? If it's being served to all your guests, then are you okay with the fact that we're going to just throw out flavors willy-nilly? I mean, not really, but it's like as soon as you hit more than 2 flavors, I would rather have a station, because what happens is my service staff will have a tray and it'll have chocolate and vanilla, but it won't have red velvet or strawberry or tuxedo or tiramisu if you're getting cake from Cameron Tinker. And so invariably the person goes, but I want the cake that that table has. And so as soon as you hit more than 2 flavors, I think you should put it as station. So I'm going to ask you all of those things, but I ask you that in a phone call so that all our dots are connected. I'm going to confirm, hey, we give a non-alcoholic drink station with all our weddings. Is it going to be sweet tea? Is it going to be unsweet tea? Is it going to be lemonade? Do you have any kids? Do you have diabetics? What are we doing there? You get a Keurig coffee station. It comes with white, hot, cold cups, but sometimes mom thinks we need to have a glass mug. Okay, great. Okay, you probably, unless you're having 4,000 guests, you probably can get away with 25 mugs, unless it's like December and it's cold. I check all those boxes. The main thing to ask is about food. Where's it coming from? All of that, but also who's your day of? Because your day of person needs to know all of this stuff.
And who is cutting the cake? Do they cut the cake? Because a lot of caterers do not cut the cake. They do not offer that, so you will want to plan for that as well. Like we talked about busing, do they clean the plates and stuff at the end?
I don't even think about that, because I'm providing the china typically. So it's like, I mean, and I always laugh because people sometimes goes, now how does staffing work? Do we tell you what we want? It's like, oh no. You tell me what you want to happen at your reception, and I will tell you how many bodies it requires to do that. We have a large wedding. It is going to be beautiful, but it has a lot of moving parts and pieces, and I will have between 20 and 24 people on the floor between kitchen, service staff, and bar staff.
Where's that wedding at?
It's on a private farm.
Oh, okay.
Which is part of why there's so much staff.
Yeah. And then you mentioned one thing, allergies. I met with a couple, I think it was actually last week. They have, I think it's about 30 guests, and one of them has the tree nut allergy. Like, it's a very severe allergy.
Like anaphylaxis. Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, as I'm referring caterers, I have to keep this in mind, because what if the caterer does something wrong on that day? How do you handle those situations? Like, what precautions do you take when somebody tells you that they have a guest with a food allergy?
Probably it's easier for me than for most, because we're typically not preparing for multiple events at the same time. That's the issue, is that if somebody comes to us and they have a tree nut allergy that is going to cause anaphylaxis, we're not going to do anything with nuts. That's fine. Now, are there nuts in our kitchen? Yes. But if we're not cooking with them that week, I have less concern. But if you're a caterer that's cooking for 4 weddings, cross-contamination can become a big problem, because you have to make sure that there is no from menu A to menu B to menu C. I mean, we put it on stuff. Allergies are something that are more and more a product of what we do. So, I mean, I ask things. If we're doing a buffet and it has 2 entrees, one of them is going to have a gluten-free sauce. It doesn't matter, but one of them will, because it has to, because even if they give me a list of dietaries, somebody is going to walk up and go, I'm gluten-free. And so that's just kind of our policy. We have been dealing with this well enough and long enough that we can do that. I actually have my husband and my youngest both have a wheat intolerance. I've been cooking gluten-free for almost a decade. We know what we can do to make that happen.
I do want to talk a little bit about this TikTok that I saw yesterday. I know I probably talk about TikTok on every single podcast. It is my favorite form of social media. If you are getting married, I highly recommend being on there and looking through stuff. But there's a couple, I think that they were on the West Coast, but I'm not positive. Either way, it doesn't matter. They had a wedding, and I'm gathering that it was at a campground type facility, more outdoorsy. and they brought in a taco company to prepare the tacos and the meat on site, serve it on site. They basically said that the taco company was late getting there, that the food was supposed to be served at 3. It was not served until 5. So, first of all, the taco company has probably never done weddings before. They didn't know how to plan their time accordingly. The other thing, the bigger issue, is how they were handling all of the food. They were cooking it all on site, and they had different types of meat, and they were wearing gloves, but they were going back and forth between the raw meat, the cooked meat, and then they were making vegetarian options, but they were also wearing those same gloves. And I'm like, well, if this was a problem and you saw this happening, why didn't you say anything then? But the issue was about 40 of their guests ended up getting food poisoning. And the bride and or groom, one had to go to the ER that night because they had gotten so dehydrated. They were like, a lot of them were camping. And so they were all in this campsite and they were all getting sick in the middle of the night. So I can't even imagine how miserable that was. There are so many things that went wrong in the scenario. And so they were talking about how all of this was the caterer's fault on TikTok and blasting the caterer for this. And while, yes, the caterer did some things that weren't ideal, obviously, we also have to go back and look at the decision that the couple made. And these are the things that sometimes people don't want to hear because they probably were the cheapest option. Because I really wanted to know how much this couple paid for these people to be there. Was this, people that had a food truck, or were they brand new? Were they cooking it on the food truck? Were they cooking it on a grill, some random grill at some random campsite? Did they have a Mexican restaurant that they worked at every day? Like, had they done this before? Did the couple provide the meat for them since they were cooking it on site? There were so many questions that I had when they were, blasting this company. And, it sucked that literally ruined their wedding. It ruined the whole experience for their guests. It ruined, people were leaving early. People were sick all night. People had to go to the ER. These are the scenarios that I try to prevent from happening. A lot of times in my meetings, people don't like what I have to say, especially when it comes to, the cheaper options. And I see on Facebook all the time when people are like, I'm looking for a cheap caterer. And people tag me in that. I'm like, that doesn't exist. If you want a cheap and a good, that doesn't exist. Like, I can't even respond to that. It's not trying to be rude or anything. It just, that's what happens when you go with cheap. So saying all of this, you and I talk a lot about budget and how you need X amount of money to even have a wedding now. I would say our average wedding here is probably the 30,000. It's really hard to do a wedding for less than that. And that's sometimes even hard to make it happen for that, depending on your guest count. If you have a younger couple and they have, we'll say $10,000 for a wedding, and they want to invite 150 people, what would you recommend that they do for their wedding? How would you recommend they spend that money? And just like, what would be the easiest amount of stress for them if they had a $10,000 overall budget for everything?
Oh gosh. I mean, and this is where in the world we live in, it's terrible because $10,000 is a lot of money. I mean, that's the thing I'm going to say first because I hate the idea that we are hating a little bit on somebody that has a budget like that. Instead, I think we should praise them for deciding that that's a reasonable amount of money to spend and they're not going to put it all on credit cards and everything else.
I mean, that's mom and dad salary. Yeah.
Oh, I have seen parents take money out of retirement accounts to pay for wedding and all this. And I think, oh, is that the best decision? And that's a very gray area for us because it's not my money. Back in the day, like my parents have been married for 52 years, quite happily. They got married in the church and then they had cake and punch in the church basement. And there are a lot of people that's really what they should do. That, they should have cake and punch for that 100, 150 people in the church basement. And then the 2 sets of parents and maybe the wedding party go have a nice dinner somewhere. And that's how you spend that money. Speaking of the parents that have been married for 52 years, they had their 50th 2 years ago and we went to Malone Banquets. I mean, obviously, could I have cooked for the 20-ish people that we had who came in? Yes, but they wanted me to be a guest and everything else. We hired Gold Shield to transport everybody. And we had a very nice dinner for 20 people at Malone's. I brought in custom linens from Purdon's. I had flower centerpieces done. We did family style appetizers. We had menus so you could pick like 4 or 5 entrees. We did a consumption bar, and I would guess by the time we were all said and done, we spent about 5 on 25 people. That was 2.5 years ago. We had a very nice meal. We had like 4 appetizers that were shared by the table, and one of the entrees, you could have the 8-ounce filet with all the things and all that. I mean, it was very nice, and we did an open bar and everything else. But the truth of the matter is $10,000. What I would tell you is that what people don't do is, okay, $10,000 divided by 100 guests. You don't have very much money per person. And okay, what did you spend on photos? I mean, the part about weddings is you have two sets of costs. You have the costs that are irregardless of how many guests cost. What does the venue cost? What does photos cost? What does the dress cost? All of that stuff. So those costs, and then you have the costs of the per person costs. The plate, how many linens you need, because that's how many tables you need, how many centerpieces you need, all of that stuff. But I mean, what is on the cheap end of photography these days?
2,500.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a quarter of that $10,000 budget. By the time you do a dress and he does a tux, you've probably killed another grand. So there's 3,500. You get a cake, depending on where it comes from. I mean, now, yes, you can go get sheet cakes from Costco. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. If cake is, and they have good cake, and if you're not dying to have that beautiful 4-tier cake, that's a great option. But, I mean, it goes fast. I would say my clients probably, their budgets start at about 50 and go to 75 pretty easily. We will probably do a couple of weddings this year that we're going to range somewhere between 125 and 150, which is a lot of money. That's how they've chosen to spend it. And they are blessed to have multiple people that are contributing. And those are weddings that are having 200 guests.
I've been meeting with couples, meeting with the bride before, and her friend has come with her. I actually had, the friend was like, I've been married 5 years now, and I'm still paying on my wedding. She told me what venue. It was not a venue that we had mentioned today, but it was a very nice, very lovely venue. And I'm like, I can't imagine paying on a wedding 5 years after the wedding. Everything sounds like a lot. And this is really where you have to think about what is most important to you. And if you want to do something smaller, to be able to stay on budget, you can absolutely do that. Like Diane talked about her parents having an anniversary party. That is also very common. A lot of people will do 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and just to go out, have an awesome party at that point. Don't ever feel like just because you are getting married, like your wedding day has to be the biggest party in the world by any means.
And I think that's the piece. It's like my mom likes to say that it supports the economy. If you have the money to spend it. I mean,
I'll help you spend it by all means. Yeah.
Right. Well, and me too. The Albani wedding, which was this last year, they spent like $600 million on this wedding. The jewelry alone, it was like a month long. I mean, but they're worth billions of dollars. It's like, okay, great. Spend it. Support everybody in the world. I mean, I'm a small business person. The people that work for me, they appreciate the money they get paid. So, but I think that it's kind of like buying something and putting it on a credit card. If at the end of the month you can pay that credit card off, great. If at the end of the month you can't, you don't need that. And weddings need to be the same way.
Just to kind of wrap up, let's talk a little bit about some of the trends you are seeing food-wise for 2025 and going into 2026. I feel like we've had a lot of food stations at weddings the last couple of years. How are you seeing that going into the next year?
We will do more stations and plated than anything else.
Okay.
I think our clients have somewhat of a negative feeling towards a buffet. They don't like the fact that people have to get up, that they have to go get it. And it serves a purpose. And the truth of the matter is you're not paying for as much staff because your guests are getting up and getting their food. But they like, if they're going to have people have to get up, they'd rather do stations. It also lets them do more interesting food. So I would say stations are still very popular, and plated is really popular for us. And then I think we're doing a bunch of late night snacks. I would say about 50% of the time people don't eat them. Just reality.
Really?
My staff doesn't like them because it's an extra step, but that's still a pretty big trend. I honestly am always supportive of getting pizza, getting Goodfellas and have it double cut because everybody will eat it. And I think that's the thing, late night snacks, I think a lot of the time it doesn't get eaten. People like the concept, but I think if you do something that is portable from the venue. Like we did chicken biscuits a couple months ago, one of our last weddings of the season. Well, we packed those up. They took them on the bus, and on the bus, the people ate the chicken biscuits.
Yes.
They didn't take the time to eat them because they were too busy dancing and drinking, but when they got on the bus, they had a chicken biscuit.
And I do think that also pulls people off the dance floor, like you talked about last call. It needs to be something that they can just eat quickly. We paid for the DJ. We want everybody on the dance floor as much as possible. What about signature drinks? Are we still seeing a lot of signature drinks going into this year?
We are, and I'm a big fan of signature drinks. And the reason I'm a big fan of signature drinks is it alleviates the bar at the beginning. The time when the bar is most congested is when people leave the ceremony and go to cocktail hour, and everyone is getting a drink at the same time. And so if we can pass a couple of signature drinks and people can grab those, or we have several clients that they're doing champagne. As people leave the ceremony, we'll have shelves with a table with a bartender or two stationed, and people can grab a glass, and we're going to pour champagne for people to take. Things like that, anything that can kind of help with the bar. We're still doing a fair number of bourbon tastings during cocktail hour at weddings. It gives people, when they have lots of out-of-town guests, an opportunity to taste a few bourbons. How we handle our bourbon tasting is I like to do 3 or 4 bourbons. I'm trying usually not to do like true unicorns, but stuff that people haven't had. Like, you might do something rye, or you might do a barrel pick, or do something that's barrel strength. And what we do is we put them out with the traditional accompaniment so they can taste. Okay, what does bourbon do with chocolate? What does bourbon do with Parmesan cheese? What does bourbon do with citrus? And then after cocktail hour, that bourbon goes to the bar. So if somebody's tasted something and go, oh, I like Michter's rye, it's at the bar and they could get it on the rocks or with an old fashioned later in the night.
That's fun. I hadn't even thought about it going from the bourbon tasting to the bar, but that makes sense.
Yeah, they buy it. So it's like usually we'll sit down and go, hey, we'll do 3 bottles of this, 3 bottles of this, 3 bottles of this, and we'll sample it during cocktail hour, and then it goes to the bar.
Anything new food-wise?
There's this fine line between stuff being new and interesting and too funky for the masses. You and I would be a fine example. You don't eat nearly the things that I eat, partially because of allergies and partially because you're picky. I tell people one of the conversations we have is that it's always best to be mindful of your guests when you're picking a menu. If you love Brussels sprouts, but no one else in your family does, probably we shouldn't serve Brussels sprouts at your wedding because it doesn't make sense if you're going to pay for food that nobody's going to eat. So I try and be mindful of that when I'm selling stuff to people. So, some of the stuff that's funky and trending doesn't make sense. On the flip side, we just did a wedding event yesterday and we served pizza rolls, but they were homemade. So it's the pizza rolls everybody likes. So it's like, okay, let's do a homemade version of this. And that was inspired by a restaurant in New York who is pretty TikTok famous among other things, and they're selling good spinach and artichoke dip and homemade pizza rolls.
If a couple comes to you with an idea, is that something that you're open to?
We did a ramen station several years ago because the groom was half Japanese. We've done Middle Eastern stations. I've made Armenian food because that's what ethnically one of the parts of the couple was. So I mean, yes, we are amenable to things. I've made strawberry pie that's grandma's strawberry pie recipe because that's what we wanted to have at the wedding and grandma wasn't still with us. So yes, I mean, we're very willing to be flexible and talk through some stuff.
Diane, any final advice for couples when it comes to planning their wedding, their budget, their food, their bar for 2025, 2026?
Talk to everybody. I think probably the biggest advice, and this is the hard part because the money piece, it's a lot of money and there are lots of players. I have two boys. And so I tell people it's like the mother of the groom is supposed to shut up and wear beige. And I will be terrible at that. But my caveat is I am going to shut up and wear beige and write a check. Because weddings today, traditionally the father of the bride paid for the wedding. And today's weddings are so expensive. Even not expensive weddings are so expensive that it usually takes multiple parties to help pay. Frequently, the bride's parents are paying for certain things, the groom's parents are paying for certain things, the couple is paying for certain things. Now, obviously, the older the couple is and all of these things, it changes. But I tell people that your best bet is to get a realistic budget number and either be okay with having 10% that you're going to add on top of that. And if you only go over 10%, you're doing well. Or if you can't afford to go over 10%, take 10% away. So if your budget is $30,000 and it's a hard number, it's like plan a wedding for $25,000 so that when you might end up at $28.50. And I call it sparkle money, because it's the money that, I fell in love with XYZ. Because the other part about wedding planning is there's all this stuff that really doesn't make it into the budget, but that you buy. It's like you go into Hobby Lobby and you find something, or mom finds something, or somebody, and you spend $50 here, $200 here, or $300 here. And that all also adds up. I'm a big fan of pretty fun, either patterned or textured or satin napkins. I would rather do a poly linen to the floor, which is a less expensive linen, and then splurge on a napkin or a cake table linen. And if you have given yourself that fluff padding in your budget, that's your sparkle. Your sparkle can be that pattern napkin that came from BBJ La Tavola that we're not going to talk about the fact that it's going to cost us $4 a piece. But okay, it's $400 for 100 guests, but you get great bang from that $400, and maybe you spend a little bit less on centerpieces, and poof, there it is. So there are ways to make good decisions with your budget. It's just if you don't start out making good decisions with your budget, it's hard to get back on track. And the other thing that I will tell people is all of the budget things say about 10% is what your venue is going to cost. In Lexington, Kentucky, nothing is 10% of your budget. You're going to be lucky if it's 20. What happens is people sit down with their budget and then they go into the Knot or Wedding Wider and they get that pie chart and it tells you, okay, you should spend this much on this and this much on this and this much on this. And what people do is they book a couple of things that are more expensive than their budget calculator tells them they should be. And they tell themselves they're going to make it up someplace else. They're never going to make it up anywhere else. That's the hard part. My big advice, even though it's not a catering piece, is really talk to your parents, talk to the groom's parents, talk to all the people. If grandma's willing to chip in for someone, be brave enough to pick up the phone and say, Grandma, you said you'd help. What does that look like? And it may be that she goes, I'll pay for X. and you can go, great, you're going to pay for the flowers. And then the next step is, Grandma, what do you think the flowers are going to cost? So you have a number that you can tell your florist, hey, I'm trying to keep my flowers in this range because somebody's paying for them.
Yep. When it comes to the budget, talking about the knot and wedding wire, when you go to simplylovestudio.com/blog, there is a budget outline there that I have done. It was last updated in September,
Okay.
about the low end of things, the high end of things, kind of the average of all the different areas for the wedding, what things cost, how they're priced. I do have a new one that I literally updated the beginning of this week. I will get that updated hopefully before this comes out, so it will be updated. And anytime you ever are listening to this, you have questions about budget, what things cost, feel free to reach out to me, because what you see online nationwide is not Lexington, Kentucky.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Diane, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to see all of the things that you create this year, and we will be back with you in season 4 to start it off and recap this year and talk about next year.
For more information about Simply Love Studio or to schedule your wedding consultation, go to simplylovestudio.com.